You know what that beautiful bass line means? It's time for me to get up, walk over to the other side of Studio 9 for the first of 3 appearances on the show today by our friend Bryan Hayes. Bryan, I don't know if we've ever had someone on 3 times on the same show. Are you pretty excited to complete the trifecta?
Yes, I'm honored. I appreciate that. I'm setting the bar high here, I guess, and maybe I can break it at some point down the road. Luke Wilson will probably try, I would assume, by the fall, right? I mean, he'll probably try to get in 4 blocks, maybe 5. But, yeah, if you're telling me this is a new record, I wear that with pride. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're going to put a plaque up, maybe raise a banner here with a picture of you at some point. But that'll be for after our vacation. Bryan, the Blue Jays season, that's where we're going to focus right now in our first chat. Just an unequivocal disaster. Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins, I know you put a lot of blame on them, but should we actually be putting more blame on the players themselves than the management?
Yes, I think the players deserve a lot of the criticism here, and I don't think they get it because, you know, Shapiro and Atkins are such whipping boys right now in the fan base, right? Like, it's such constant attention on them, and believe me, they've done a lot of the damage here as well that has led to this, and we'll get to that momentarily. But George Springer, until recently, was statistically one of the worst hitters in baseball. I mean, the last few weeks, George has come along, he's come around, and maybe he carries that over into the second half, and it's all good. But the first 2 months of the season, George Springer was really struggling. Bo Bichette has 4 home runs. 4 home runs. He has a negative wins above replacement. That's Bo Bichette we're talking about here. Kevin Gausman, his splits, home and away, are really upside down. His numbers have not been great. Bassett hasn't been great. And they've run into some injuries, too, which I don't think is on the front office, not necessarily on the players either, but it's a reality of the situation where I get why there's so much focus on Shapiro and Atkins. I talk about it basically daily. I know you do it a lot as well, Jay. But the players, 1 through 9 in the order, 1 through 5 in the rotation. The bullpen's been a mess. A lot of that is injury-related, but it's the worst bullpen in baseball right now. That's on the players. That's on the bats. That's on the arms. Across the board, all of the players, for the most part, have been underwhelming. There's some guys who have met expectations, very few who have exceeded them. So when you have a number of guys you can look at and say, that's not good enough, that's not good enough, that's not good enough, you're going to be at the All-Star break and you're going to be 8 games under 500.
So despite the fact that you and I have just talked for the last couple of minutes about how the players need to shoulder more of the blame, my next question is going to exclusively be about Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins. So, Bryan, I know how you feel about this, that you probably would not like them to both be back next season, but that's not my question. My question is, do you think they will be back next season?
I do think Mark Shapiro will be back next season because I think he wears multiple hats within the organization. And one of the hats he wears is his relationship with ownership and obviously the time and effort invested in the ballpark and the improvements that they've made to it. And I think they're very happy with the renovations. I think they should be. I think they knocked them out of the park, to use a horrible pun here. But I think they did a great job, and I think Mark Shapiro deserves a lot of credit for that. And I think the fans have obviously benefited greatly from that. You know the Rogers Center. I mean, it's a concrete just jungle down there. I mean, there was no soul to it in the past. I know it had its history, and if there's 45,000 people in there and the roof is open, it was great. But they tried to add a lot of character to it, tried to bring the community into it, try to feel like a ballpark, and I think they accomplished that. I think Mark Shapiro, as a result, did a very good job. And also, Mark Shapiro's only really had one GM as the president, right? Yes, he inherited Alex Anthopoulos, but basically the second Shapiro showed up, Anthopoulos was leaving. So he's had one GM bullet, quote unquote. So generally speaking, guys in that position, they get more opportunities to work with more people. So I think we're really talking about Ross Atkins here. And I think at some point, ownership and probably Mark Shapiro will realize something has to give here because the fans are so upset. They're so rattled with the way this season's played out, the way last season played out, the way the offseason played out. And we just talked about the players, like you said, Jay. On a micro level, you can look at a lot of the players this year and say this has not been good enough, clearly. But if you bring it back and you look at it from a macro standpoint, you realize Ross Atkins is the GM and Mark Shapiro. And let's not be naive here. Mark is a baseball guy. His fingerprints are all over the baseball team, clearly. But they've been on the job now for 9 years. 9 years. They have not won one playoff game. Not one. They have a top 10 payroll, a bottom 10 team, and a bottom 10 farm system. So you've been here for almost a decade. You have top 10 financial support, bottom 10 team, bottom 10 farm system. That's very hard to sell. That's a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources, not a lot of results, and I don't see it getting better in the future. So I'm not convinced Ross Atkins will return, but I don't know how much that's going to change in terms of the way this place is run on a daily basis, because Mark Shapiro, again, is going to make a call on Vladdy, make a call on Bichette, make a call on rebuilds, make a call on the finances, make a call on the manager. Shapiro, if he's still here, it's probably going to be run very similarly. I think Shapiro will be back. I'm not convinced Atkins will be, because I think ownership and Shapiro will realize they have to do something to appease the fans here, because they're so rattled with the way this thing's played out.
Bryan, you mentioned the fact that Shapiro would have to make a call on Bo Bichette and have to make a call on Vladdy. It's kind of true that what happens with those two players really is completely what happens with this franchise going forward, right? Everything hinges on these two players. You either extend them and you build around them, or you trade them away and you start over. You're the new GM of the Toronto Blue Jays, and gosh, would the fan base ever love that if that were actually true. But let's say it happened, Bryan. What would you do with Vladdy and Bo as we head to the trade deadline?
Well, I'm definitely not going to trade them between now and the end of the month. These are off-season moves. Like you just said, Jay, these are multi-layered, foundational decisions. You're talking about ticket sales. You're talking about jersey sales. You're talking about a renovation that cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and you want to sell tickets, season tickets, for steep prices. And as you just said, and it's 100% accurate, if they move off Bo and Vladdy, they're telling everybody this era's over. Now, I kind of think it's over anyway based on the way they're playing, right? Like, they peaked a couple of years ago, this era, this Shapiro and Atkins game plan. It peaked a couple of years ago. They held on for dear life last year and got smoked, obviously, by Minnesota. And this year, they're not going to sniff the playoffs. And I can't imagine it'll get much better in the future. But these are still young players. Bichette's complicated because he's been so bad this year. Like 4 home runs. Again, he's got a negative wins above replacement. He plays a primary position at short. Yet prior to this season, prior to the last calendar year, because the second half of last year also was not great for Bo, this guy was a building block. He was a foundational player. He was a guy that was a hitting machine. He hit for some power. He stole bases. So they got to figure out what is Bo, and it takes 2 to tango. Does he want to be a part of the program? Vladdy, for me, I think is a guy you keep long term. Now, this will come down to dollars and cents, though, as well. Vladdy said recently he wants to be a Blue Jay for the rest of his career. He doesn't think about money, but we all know that's not true. He's going to think about money at some point, or someone in his group, his agent, his family members, they will eventually think about money. What Vladdy, to me, has determined, based on the way he's played for years now, is that he's a very good player. He's not a great player. He's not a superstar. And he's not a good player. He's a very good player. He's a guy that's going to hit for some power, give you some numbers in terms of OPS. He is a baller. He plays every single day. He does not get hurt. He loves to play the game. He's got an infectious personality. He's a big marketing tool. He's the face of the franchise. I think that's worth a lot, but I don't think it's worth Juan Soto money. It's not Ohtani money. It's not Aaron Judge money. So he's going to have to come back, I think, in terms of maybe what he's looking for. But if I'm the Blue Jays, I'm doing what I can to make sure Vladdy sticks around. Bo's much more complicated. I can't guarantee you what they'll do with Bichette. For me, though, I wait to the offseason. I try to work out a deal with Vladdy. I keep him around, even if you are going to rebuild, even if you are going to retool, because he's in his mid-20s. I think he's got a lot of baseball left. He's just getting into his prime. Bichette, more complicated. Vladdy, it's more simple. I'm keeping Vladdy, and then I'm figuring out what else I'm going to do beyond that.
Bryan, we've had some pretty serious discussions here about a very bad baseball team, so I want to lighten things up a bit. As you know, a Monday night home run derby in baseball, and before the home run derby, Ingrid Andress, a country music singer I had never heard of until Monday, sang the United States national anthem. Let's take a look.
And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. For the
Wow, I never thought I'd yearn for the dulcet tones of Carl Lewis, Brian, but here we are. What happened there?
That was Carl Lewis and Roseanne Barr having a child and then showing up at the 2024 Home Run Derby and singing the Star-Spangled Banner. I don't say this lightly. There's no way that's a professional singer.
Yeah.
That has to be a body double or a voice double. This is a Will Ferrell movie that he's working on and he hasn't told anyone. Or Ashton Kutcher's back and we're being punked. Because that's outrageous. That is truly outrageous for a professional. I happen to like country. I've come around the last decade. I'm not familiar with her work. I'm not going to look into it. After I heard that, I can guarantee you I will not become a fan. She didn't just sell me. But that's got to be the worst of all time for a professional, right? Like Carl Lewis is one thing. Roseanne Barr is another.
Right.
But that's a professional. That can't be serious, Jay. I refuse to believe that that was actually a serious professional singer. There's no chance.
Even Dennis K.C. Parks, who famously botched the Canadian anthem at the very first Las Vegas Posse game, at least he was in the melody of Oh Christmas Tree, right? He had something going there. It was wrong, but he had something going there. Ingrid, my goodness. And Brian, this is the most fascinating thing. She won a Grammy Award. I don't know for what, but she won a Grammy Award. The Grammys are forever tainted now. I don't know what else to say, but I'll say this, Brian. After the break, you and I are going to be chatting the Open Championship. Does Rory have a chance? I'm going to ask Brian that right after the break.